Right, let's welcome our second panel then, folks, shall we? Let's say hello to John Merry from Lanyon Bowdler, Paul Brown from WR Partners, Nick Jones from Throgmorton Associates, and Hollie Whittles from the Federation of Small Businesses, among many other things. Give them a round of applause. Much the same as last time, I want to sort of, if there's anything that's come out of the first panel debate that any of you folks want to comment on, then that's obviously a good place to start. But then I want to talk really in this channel session a little bit more around some of the professional support that's available to businesses and maybe how they're using it, if they're using it, how they could use it better. But let's do a left to right again like we did before and just give us a quick overview of your business. Nick, we've already met you, haven't you? But no harm telling us again.
I'd say this is a right to left, but you're saying left to right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking of our audience, that's all. So.
Yeah, it's all about you guys. Yeah, so left to right, sorry, my apologies. So Nick Jones, now Director of Throgmorton Associates Wealth Management. I was still struggling to say that right, and it's only been April now, so we're closing in 5 or 6 months after being Nick Jones for a long time. We get involved in advising individuals and business owners, sometimes about their employees and benefits they can provide, and sometimes about their own situations, including building up to and enjoying an exit that then means they can do what they want for the rest of their life without worry. That's me.
Thanks, Nick. John Merry, Head of Employment Law at Lanyon Bowdler Solicitors. First of all, apologies for my croaky voice. I nearly dislocated my voice box last night when Andros Townsend put the second goal in for Everton. We're a full-service law firm with offices throughout the Marches region and into North Wales. As I say, I'm the head of the employment department. I act mainly for employers, but we also act for employees.
Morning, everybody. My name's Paul Brown, and I'm the tax partner and director of advisory at WR Partners, but a lot of you in the room will probably know us as Whittingham Riddell. So we're full-service accountants, tax advisors, business advisors, and we look to partner with our clients to help them protect their future and achieve financial freedom. Is that okay, Alice? Thank you.
Has anyone got a non-slip max? I'm wearing a very slippy dress. I feel like I'm falling off the chair. Hi, I'm Hollie Whittles. I'm director of Pepper Frog Systems, which is a global data analytics consultancy, and also director of Fraggleworks, which I'm probably more known for locally, which does sort of digital marketing. And then, as Carl said, I have many hats. So I'm also the West Midlands Regional Chair for the Federation of Small Businesses.
Excellent. And John, my vocal cords are fine because I'm a Wolves fan, so I don't have anything to get excited about at the moment. Let me throw this one out of the panel to start with. Obviously, we've got furlough, the end of furlough coming around the corner. We've had now a year or so for companies to try and get their heads around the kind of support they maybe need. So what sort of things are businesses talking about, and what is really still posing them, concerns or worries at the moment? Let me check that one up, Paul.
I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of our clients are more nervous now than they have been for pretty much the whole of the pandemic, and it's not really pandemic-related issues. It's supply chain issues, it's actually getting product that they can sell, it's getting raw materials. There's a lot of challenges that I think have kind of crept out of the woodwork a little bit, which means that their order books are there, so they're not actually facing challenges with order books, it's actually fulfilling the orders that they've got. I think, if I'm honest, the end of furlough makes me nervous because I think there's a lot of businesses haven't really planned particularly well for that. I think there's going to be a bit of a shock when it comes to the end of the support. But actually, as I say, it's really kind of moved on from pandemic-related issues to issues that they may be indirectly pandemic-related, but it's more related to just getting raw materials, it's getting product to sell and actually, delivering for their customers.
And John, I imagine from a legal point of view, you've got a lot of companies that are trying to wrestle with the idea of how they bring staff back into the workplace and how maybe things have to be different when they get there. Is that a big issue for you guys at the moment?
Yeah, we've been dealing with that for quite a while now, obviously, as the pandemic's evolved and people have been returning to work for some time now in fits and starts. But employers will see another tranche of that as many employers still have employees on furlough and we'll have to deal with that by the end of the month. On that point of dealing with employees who are still on furlough, for many employers, unfortunately, it will be a case of having to bite the bullet with the support running out and making redundancies. there'll be different challenges as well. The reality is that many of the employees who are still on furlough now are there despite the fact that colleagues have come back over time, and the reason why they're still off is because really they're long-term sick, or really they're a problem employee. There were conduct issues, performance issues, personality issues. And employers are having to confront those now because they can't kick it into the long grass any longer. Amongst the employees who you can point to medical reasons for being off, there'll be those who have, or at least have asserted that they have, psychological issues with coming back into the workplace. And we've been seeing that over time. Employers already, with the open up of workplaces, have seen these issues already, like I say, more to be confronted at the end of furlough. And that is a challenge, particularly taking into account there can be disability discrimination considerations with how to deal with people who have, or like I say, profess to have psychological issues. That's a matter for advice in individual circumstances. The classic lawyers sit on the fence point might be said. But from a practical point of view, it's about reassuring people about the COVID-safe measures you should still have in your workplace and applying those. That will encourage a lot of people, some people, to come back. Those who that isn't enough for, I'd strongly recommend they get properly psychiatrically assessed at an early stage, rather than just saying, oh, well, we'll get a GP report, we'll speak to OC Health maybe, and develop a strategy for dealing with those people properly.
And Nick, I guess, when times get tough, money is one of the first things people start thinking about, worrying about, considering. So other than getting your head around the change of company name, have you found that the kind of things people want to talk to you about has changed in the last year or so?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Normally, if there's an issue going on, then it's a recession and everyone's struggling because values are going down, pension values are crashing, and headlines will be awful, and the news will be concentrating on the fact it was down 5% today, billions wiped off your pension, but they never report when it actually goes up the next day, back up by whatever was lost. So you only see one side, and the constant battering of negative news on the financials moves you to be more emotionally concerned than perhaps you needed to be. With this pandemic and the fact that it happened to everybody at the same time, March last year, the markets dipped all over the world, wherever you invested in, if it was pension money, if it was your stocks and shares ISAs, investment bonds, wherever you may be sitting with some cash, that had all gone down. And if it was a well-diversified portfolio, it actually came back quite quickly. So again, the press hasn't really focused on the financial stuff, but within 6 weeks, our portfolios were probably up to where they were and have been rising ever since. So the financial concerns that somebody might well have been justified to have actually been something not to worry about. So if you've got a good relationship with your advice place, wherever you go for that advice, then they should have been holding your hand, or been at least at the end of the phone to say, don't worry, if your goals are still the same, if your objectives haven't changed and it's still a retirement aged 50 in 6 years, don't worry about that dip in values, because it's okay, you've got time for it to recover. And that was, fortunately, if there's any positive news that's come out, then that was the good thing that we found with our clients. So our focus became more on making sure they had all our numbers. When we closed the office March last year, the last thing we did was send a letter to everybody with my personal mobile number, email address, and just said, okay, whoever's client you are within the practice, if you're really worried about these things, ring me, and we can have a chat and put your mind at rest. I only had half a dozen calls over the next few weeks, really, out of nearly 1,000 clients at that point. But the offer was there, and people's feedback has been really good since, to say, you know what, that's just what I needed, just to know that you were there if we needed. Because although the office is shut, we're very much still working. So the financial concerns that may well have been with the recession weren't necessarily as to the fore as they might have been now. I suppose the other side of it was that the furlough scheme and people who are used to earning money had a drop in income if they were furloughed and working from home, but then similarly their outgoings probably reduced because they weren't travelling to work and they weren't spending money on coffees and they weren't doing all that normal stuff that they do. So probably they weren't actually in a bad position. And we're finding people now who haven't been able to go on holiday, they haven't changed the car, they haven't done all that stuff that they would have expected to do for the last couple of years. So they're sitting with a bit of a nest egg and kind of saying, okay, well, I suppose I should give this to you then, Nick. I was like, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, well, why not? Yeah, so things like stocks and shares ISAs, there's a 20,000 personal allowance this current tax year. So that's 40,000 between you and a husband or wife. You can stash that quite nicely in a tax-efficient vehicle that's there flexibly for whatever you need it for in the future. No capital gains tax, no income tax, no tax on any growth, and it's there for whatever you need. So if you've got money that's sitting in a bank account, inflation is about 2%. Interest rates are nothing like that on a bank account, so you're losing money by leaving it there. Get it working harder. They're available all over the place. You can do cash ones, but the interest rates are similar to cash bank accounts, so not very exciting. But accessibility is good, and then the level of risk depends on what you're comfortable with. So having more cash maybe that you haven't been spending is a good opportunity to put some money aside for that rainy day or that future pandemic or whatever it may be that takes the wind out of our sails that we didn't see coming.
So it's these evil journalists who are twisting the view of the market, really. You can't trust any of them, can you? Hollie, you became regional chair of the Federation of Small Businesses in the West Midlands in the middle of all this, didn't you? And, as a business owner yourself, what specifically for small businesses is on their minds at the moment?
So that was a real challenge. So I came into it sort of halfway through COVID, and the role is representing small businesses. And when we say the word small businesses, we don't just mean startups and micro businesses. It could be actually big businesses with a couple of million turnover. But it's pushing back against the government and saying, yes, thank you for what you've done. These grants, you've pushed them out quicker than anything else, but there's still more. There are still businesses that have fallen through the gaps, the limited company people, shareholders. What are going to be the impacts of changes to national insurance? And it's going to hit us if you're taking dividends out of the company, the extra sort of hit on that. So all these kind of issues that small businesses are raising, and they use the business rates as a way of getting out the grants, which was great. But what if you were two businesses in the same space? One of you didn't qualify. And the same for things like small business rate relief. So all of these key issues that businesses are talking about, my role is then to feed that back through the Federation of Small Businesses, who then literally sit around with number 10 saying, yes, thank you, but there's still more work to be done. And obviously I'm passionate about Shropshire business, so when I'm sitting around the table with West Midlands businesses, they're talking about 5G rollout, and I'm like, we haven't even got 3G yet, can you finish that? Digital infrastructure, supplier procurement, supply chains, how a small business is going to get a bite of that cherry when HS2 comes through, late payments. So the FSB recently supported the Small Business Charter, which is about every business signing up to it and paying people on time, having ethics within the business. So I'd highly encourage you to sign up for that. Actually, it's completely free. You get a logo on your website. So it's kind of all of these issues. And again, I was one of the few businesses around the table sort of saying, in Shropshire, we're still recovering from the floods. We're still trying to work out what to do with Brexit. So all of these key issues, I'm then feeding back through the FSB.
And picking up maybe on the point that Jules was making with the last panel, how are you finding that businesses are being received, in terms of access to help, financial help, whether it's to banks or other institutions? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Are there unnecessary obstacles that should be removed? Or?
I think with banking, that was an interesting one. Some people were saying that their bank was fantastic. They got the bounce back loan really quickly. Other people were saying it was an absolute nightmare, hadn't had the payments. There were businesses that were trying to start up and had problems even just creating a bank account, and it was an absolute nightmare. So Jules's question was very relevant. So again, I was sitting around the table saying, we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back. There's still so much more to be done to sort out some of this infrastructure to make access to finance and to grants a lot easier. And even with some of the grants that I'm sure most of you applied for in the room, some of the questions in there weren't really that relevant. Like if you're a startup or a micro business, you probably haven't done an R&D claim, but that was like a mandatory field on the form. So how are you going to complete that to get the grant? So just really silly things, but just feeding that all back through to help businesses.
Just want to throw out to all of you, is there in general at the moment something that you think businesses should be doing right now, but they're not doing, either because they're choosing not to do it or they're not aware of the need to do it? That's another one I've just thrown out without any notice. So who wants to have a go at that one? Go on, Paul, you're looking keen.
I'm looking stitched up, I think, is what I'm looking, Carl, to be honest. I think one thing that a lot of businesses should be doing but don't is cash flow planning and cash flow forecasting. It sounds really boring, But actually, the only way to manage your business effectively is to forecast and to plan for cash flow and understand where those lumpy costs are going to kick in, and then give you the opportunity to actually plan for it and deal with it. You know, it's a sad accounting thing to have to say, but if you're not doing it and suddenly you find yourself, you've got your first bounce back loan repayment, you've got your deferred VAT that you've got to pay, and suddenly you haven't got the cash for it, what are you going to do? Whereas if you've been planning for that, you understand when those are going to kick in. You understand the extra costs of bringing employees back from furlough, and when that kicks in, you give yourself the opportunity to plan for it and look for those alternative sources of finance. Go to the bank manager, go to, you know, the sort of, you know, a broker, go somewhere, but actually have that advance warning rather than waking up on Monday morning thinking, oh God, I've got to pay my VAT bill tomorrow, I haven't got the cash to do it. So it's planning. It is, you know, I think, you know, it was touched on in the last panel. No plan, what's the expression? No plan survives first contact with the enemy. You know, so you can plan as much as you like, but nothing will actually happen in line with that plan. But at least if you've got a plan, you can then adapt, respond, and actually react to circumstances, and you've got at least some perspective on what's coming down the road for you. It amazes me how many businesses don't really have that, or they might think for the next 1 month or the next 2 months. 12 months, 24 months, you've got to have that kind of time horizon if you're really going to manage that business successfully into the future.
So would you have found then quite a lot of the businesses that you've been dealing with maybe had some reserves right at the start of this, used them up at very early stages, and then as the time has gone on, they've needed more help, and then they need to be more cash flow smart in the last 6 months than they did in the first 6 months?
I think that's absolutely right. I think it, as I say, it's heightened by the fact that a lot of that support is either coming to an end, or people are now having to start paying back their loans. You know, there was a 12-month deferral on bounce back on C-bills, for example. Interestingly, I was talking to one of the managers from Barclays in Shrewsbury, and there was a sense initially a lot of businesses were taking out loans because they were getting it 12 months interest free, and they were just going to leave it to sit in their account, and then 364 days later they were going to pay it back. And actually there's a lot of businesses that suddenly aren't paying that back. Now, two ways to look at that. You could say that's actually a negative because they've suddenly found they've got more of a cash flow need than they thought. But actually, hopefully, there's also some positive in that they're thinking, well, actually, we've got this cash. You know, let's be honest, some of these loans are pretty cheap. We can actually use that to invest in the business and help us to grow. And I think it's that growth mindset that's going to be the difference between people who come out of this experience positively and those who come out of it, you know, potentially at risk of losing their business. Because let's be honest, in this day and age, if you're not going forwards, you're going backwards.
And John, other than staying calm at football matches, is there anything else that people are not doing that they should be doing at the moment, do you think?
I think something that I see is the fact that home working grew so rapidly and unexpectedly that a lot of employers fell into that, and they made do, and employees made do when it was a must. Going forward, it's about planning that properly. If you're going to end it, then think carefully before you end it, because it can be a useful resource, if you like. It can be a useful alternative to having everyone back in the office. Can help retain staff, motivate staff, widen your pool geographically as to who you can have working for you. It can save you some cost and so on. But making sure it's right for the business to do it at the same time, and making sure that you've got the structures right. You know, a lot of employers didn't think about the data protection implications, confidential information, proper management, supervision, mentoring, and the rest of it. So it's about not just continuing that with your eyes closed and having a proper plan if you're going to use home working going forward.
Excellent. Hollie, what about from your point of view, either through your business or through, you know, the hats that you wear? Are there particular gaps at the moment in what businesses are doing to protect themselves? Or?
Yeah, a key thing for me at the moment is skills gap shortages. So connecting employers with the students coming out of education, and also pushing back against education providers about the kind of courses and offerings that they're putting on. So I'm speaking with my IT hat on. We couldn't find an apprenticeship that matched what we do because we're cloud-based data analytics, cutting-edge machine learning, artificial intelligence. And I was looking at apprenticeships and it was all hardware, taking servers apart. I'm like, well, they're never going to be able to do that because we just don't do it. Everything's cloud-based. But from an FSB point of view, we've been sort of addressing that from the West Midlands point of view. And I chaired a seminar the other week with Andy Street, who's like the West Midlands mayor, and we were talking about this problem of skills gaps. And particularly in Shropshire, we've got the ageing population where the students are leaving. It's how do we train them and get them to stay here and actually come and work for our businesses. So I think there's a real problem there with addressing those skills gap and that disconnect between employers and education. So that's something that's very much on our radar and addressing that.
Nick, I'll end with you, and I guess I'd throw, from your point of view, throw another one into the question, as well as maybe what are people not doing that they maybe should be doing. How far ahead should we be looking at the moment in terms of our planning, do you think?
When it comes to the basic financial planning, if you're running your business well, it's protecting everybody around the table. So if you've got a boardroom and you've all got various shareholdings and something should happen to one of the people around the table, how's the business going to survive if you've got to buy those shares from that person's spouse? If the money's in the business, fantastic, and you can do it from cash flow, great. If it's not, then you've got a new director sitting on the table alongside you that might not know much about business, might not care, and might just want to extract what they can. So having policies, having shareholder agreements, cross-sale agreements, options and things that are all done legally above board doesn't cost a lot of money to cover. So for a 50-year-old, £1 million worth of cover on a 5-year policy is about £100 a month. Yeah, that's it's not even an apprentice, is it, in the scheme of things, in the cost of your business. But if that person is then deceased and then that £1 million needs to be found, a policy pays them off. Everything else carries on as normal. So just general planning like that. When it comes from a forward-looking and the business plan and the opportunities, if you're a business owner that's just running your thing, and it could be a lifestyle business, it's just about the income. It could be that you're building a value to an eventual exit. We have some very meaningful conversations with clients about how much is enough. What does the value need to be for you to be able to extract that money to then live the life that you're dreaming of, whenever that may be? And if we have those conversations early enough and we can bring that date forward, fantastic. And that's where we get some real value, real warmth, and some great client relationships. Because 65, 67, okay, well, let's just look what you've got. Let's look what's going on. Let's look at your needs. Well, why wait till then? You could do it at 62 if you do this, this, and this, and this. So rather than just going to 65 or 67 because that's the state pension age, why do that? And then having that brought forward, you've then got hopefully energy and health and enough money to do what the hell you want with your time. It could be charitable means, it could be that you start up another thing, it could be that you start doing something with your wife, partner, you could go and do something else, you could move, you could do whatever you like, but you've got the money to do it and the energy and the health, hopefully, to do it. There's nothing sadder than people who just follow a traditional, I'm going to be 65 and then I'm going to do whatever. Had a chat last night, quite sobering. Existing client, quite poorly, 65 next month, not going to make it. So sad. Don't be that.
Flexibility is the one word that I've seen, I think, in stories in Shropshire Business Magazine more than anything in the past 12 months, and not realising that there's more than one way of doing things. I'm conscious of the time. Anybody got any questions for our panel before I formally dismiss them? No, that's good. Well, you've obviously answered all our questions. Can I say then a big thanks to John Merry, Paul Brown, Nick Jones, of course, and Hollie Whittles. Thank you.